Hello and welcome to Plus One to Gaming. I'm Chris.
And I am Mark.
And we have a special guest joining us today. Welcome, George Loki Williams, to the podcast.
Glad to be on board today, guys.
And you prefer to go by Loki, is that right?
Yeah, it's an old nickname I got in my music industry days, and I never could shake it, so I adopted it.
I think it's a pretty cool nickname. Of all the nicknames you could get, mine was Stick, so Loki's probably a pretty good one.
Yeah, 3/4 of it was for being a smartass. So,
as Lokis are wont to be. But you're the first guest we've ever had on the show, and that's quite exciting for us. But what's also exciting is you have an extensive and deep background as a game designer, award-winning game designer and writer. And then you also have a very long history with Spelljammer, which is our topic for today. Very timely because the new expansions come out. But before we get into our topic of just like Spelljammer for Dummies, can you give our listeners a quick summary, just who you are and what you do?
I'm an 8th generation French Creole from New Orleans. I have, for the past 10 years, as of last month, I've been publishing Starfinder, Pathfinder 1, Dungeon Crawl Classics, and Cypher System compatible products. I've got 2 Silver Ennie Awards under my belt for help running the official Planescape website, Planewalker, which I did for about 15 years. And I was very active in the old days of the Spelljammer mailing list in the 90s when the product line stopped. And have a good bit of my pre-professional design stuff is actually up on spelljammer.org, which you may get blocked on because the guy who hosts it hasn't got it up to HTTPS security standards, but it's still all there.
That's really old internet right there.
Yeah, so yeah, and as far as the system goes, I was working in a bookstore called Claytor's Bookland when I was in college at LSU when it arrived in the box. And it's like, okay, well, this is supposed to go out with all the new game stuff tomorrow. It's like, no, it's not. This looks too cool. I'm taking it home. Charge me now, because I saw the ships, and the ships just crapped right off the bat.
Shut up and take my money.
Exactly. Or those poor college student days deducted from my paycheck.
Awesome. Well, thank you for sharing some of your background, and it's really cool just to have somebody with some of that original knowledge of Spelljammer, because I think that gives us a cool perspective to explore today.
All the original products sitting on that shelf right there.
Oh, that's awesome.
Nice.
The box on the original set died, but all of it is there.
We hopefully we can get some photos from you of that original stuff later on. That'd be really cool to share. But I'm curious, like, how did you sort of get into writing? Oh, that looks pretty well preserved for
I was using this at my table running games in '93. I take care of my books.
Yeah, I'm the guy with like paper bags wrapped around his books, like in high school.
Hey man, whatever works. Whatever works.
You gotta keep them clean. Oh, speaking of books, I forgot. I have a little special gift for our dear listeners. So I did go to the our local game store over this weekend on Friday, and I picked up my version of Spelljammer. But they also had a second. Look at that reflection. They also had a second version or another copy of the alt cover set. Mm-hmm. So this is a gift for you, dear listeners.
Nice. I can highly recommend it. As you can see, it's sitting on the shelf right here.
Yeah. Well, so if you want to get your hot little hands on this book set, all you have to do is head over to plus1togaming.com, subscribe to our newsletter email list, and make sure you click that validation email that comes through. Once you're on our email list, at the end of the month, we will pick one email at random to receive this set, and we'll send it out to you. So hop on there and sign up to get your set of the alt cover for Spelljammer.
Man, I'm going to the website right now to sign up. Am I eligible to win?
I was gonna buy copies for you guys, but they had 2, so that's all I could swing. But yeah, I just wanted to offer that to our listeners. Thank you for jumping on our show and tuning in and following us. Just wanted to do something nice for y'all.
That's amazing.
Cool. So yeah, let's get into Spelljammer. What is Spelljammer for the uninitiated?
Okay, simple short form, what in marketing we call the elevator pitch. Yeah, Spelljammer is D&D in space, but it's not D&D in space like Starfinder. Starfinder, the space element is Buck Rogers, Star Trek, Battlestar Galactica level stuff, whereas the space stuff in Spelljammer is pirates on the high seas of the Caribbean, but the ships are sailing through space. The one-eyed sky sharks are something to fear if you fall off the ship because they travel in the wake behind it. Think flintlocks, slightly better than flintlock pistols, or common swashbuckling style deep space, full-on fantasy space. The original crystal spheres and the way they were set up, that goes back to Ptolemy, one of the Egyptians who was trying to define the way the solar system was built. So it's actually rooted in old guard stuff like that. The modern system does away with the Ptolemaic layout, but that's the big difference. Think of it more like Treasure Planet, with magic replacing the scientific elements, and you're there. Now, of course, everybody's table is going to vary a little bit. I know one guy who runs is basically like Star Trek, but that's the simple difference. There's science fantasy over here with Starfinder, but it's full on fantasy with Spelljammer. It's just fantasy taken to the next level, out into space.
So it's very much like fantasy in space, not sci-fi, like going into Star Wars territory.
Yeah, very much. I mean, Star Wars is a fuzzy line because Star Wars isn't really science fiction. Star Wars is a fairy tale with science fiction trappings. So that's kind of a border case. But yeah, exactly.
Yeah, that's actually a good distinction because there are a lot of more like softer, more religious, and more like magical, whimsical aspects of Star Wars. Very cool.
You actually kind of covered that. I was wondering because I feel like a lot of people's entry point might be from a Star Wars perspective, since that's just obviously such a big property and always has been. So yeah, that was kind of one of my questions, was how much why would you want to get into Spelljammer over, say, trying any of the other sci-fi systems out there? And it sounds pretty unique, more unique than I expected.
It's got a couple of cool things going for it. One off, it's full on fantasy in space. Number two, it is one of only two full on canon connections that we have that link all of the various campaign worlds going back into the TSR days. Yeah, somebody was asking, it's like, okay, you get this little sliver of information about, what if I'm basing this in the realms? You got about 2 pages saying, oh, these are the planets. But if you go hop on, I forget whether it's D&D Beyond Drive-Thru RPG or whatever, and look at all the old 2nd edition PDFs that are up, you want to do stuff in the realms, drop $10 and get the PDF for Realm Space, the original product, which is like 70 pages, a full system map. It had like 2 poster maps in it of all the details, the planets, the NPCs. The only things that I'm not going to use is the stats. And I don't know of a DM out there personally, unless they're running for society games, that doesn't tinker under the hood with whatever they're doing. So fiddling with stats shouldn't be that big a deal, especially now, because D&D 5 is so rules light compared to AD&D.
Well, and because like we played a game recently where we just reskinned it in Star Wars. It was just straight up 5e, changed the nouns, and I think for that game it worked perfectly. There was no real, at least for me, I didn't really see any like, how are we going to figure this out in like a Star Wars setting? It just mapped over, but we didn't have some of the other stuff like ship, space, mechanics, like a lot of the stuff. We just didn't need it for that game. But it is interesting to have, different ways you can kind of get into space with these rule sets. Like, do you use Spelljammer, or can you stay with just 5e and change some nouns around?
Yeah. And I thought it was actually surprisingly easy to swap into that Star Wars reskin, staying terrestrial. If we had gone into, I did look at, how ships and things work.
Mhm.
When I was looking at that campaign, and I was like, in no way, shape, or form are these guys getting on any sort. Like that's why every ship you found was broken beyond repair. And, I mean,
Or was autopiloted.
and the few things I've read, I feel like the excitement up to this new Spelljammer release has been give me spaceships. Like that is and it sounds like Loki, your original draw to the original way back was I want a ship, which is where I'm at. So like, but how I don't understand how that could possibly work with a party. I need my own ship, or do I have to? Am I crewing it with you guys? Because that sounds almost like real hard.
Well, it all depends on how you want to approach it. Doing the Star Wars thing is great. But the only right way to play is what works with your group at your table. Doesn't matter what edition, doesn't matter what rule set, any of the rest of that. What works with your people. As far as I'm sorry, what was your other question? I'm still waiting for the ADD meds to kick in. Sorry.
No, I'm just kind of wondering how working on a ship kind of changes that maybe that party dynamic I'm used to in a normal game.
It all depends on how you do it, and different DMs have different approaches, and I've taken different approaches with different groups over the years, had one of them come on as low-level sailors, and then by the time they hit 10th level or so, somebody offs the captain, they take over, etc.
Been there, done that.
I had one group win a small ship in a card game, and that's how they ended up going into state. I had one group where the most obnoxious party member, the rationale for why they put up with him was it was daddy's ship, and things like that. So you work it in with your individual party and how you want to do it. But most of the time, it's just like, here, you have a ship that you are on or that you have access to or that you're working and paying off in a couple of instances. All of which open different varieties of campaign books. I mean, people ask me, what are some great ideas for, running an adventure? And it's like, okay, well, if you're doing stuff with existing material, a great example, I don't know if they're going to convert it to 5e, but they're doing the other APs, would be the Skull and Shackles Pirate Adventure Path that Paizo did for Pathfinder 1.
Okay.
It's pirate adventure from first level to like 17th or so. Turn the islands into asteroids, reskin a bunch of the creatures, take a couple of things and tweak them to take into account gravity planes and air envelopes, and you're done. That's the lazy man's way. Boom, you've got it. Here we go. You've got an entire campaign pretty much laid out. Think of it in terms of the swashbuckling aspect, and then lay that layer of space weird on top of it. It's like, yeah, you're on a ship. You're riding along, through the silvery space these days, because now it's in the astral, and you see the other ship pull up, and the skull and crossbones raises, and as you raise your eyeglass, you see in the classic pirate's coat with the eye patch over one eye, the mind flayer with the cutlass in hand, the small octopus sitting on his shoulder where the parrot would be, as the Olympic captain comes in for the kill because they're taking your stuff and they're going to have you for dinner. It's all a matter of framing.
You said a lot there that I want to jam in, or just jam into, because we're talking about Spelljammer.
Right.
So I think the main draw is you need to get a ship, you need to get into space, and then once you're in the space, all this weird stuff starts to happen. You have gravity, you have these gravitational planes where your ship is, and you also have these air envelopes. So we're kind of getting into a little bit like space mechanics. How does fantasy space work? How's it all interconnected?
Okay, now I'm going to address both the old way and the new way at the same time. In space, unless something's unless something's a sizable sphere like a moon, instead of regular gravity, it has a gravity plane. Everything above the plane is pulled down to it. Everything below it is pulled up to it. Now, in the old days, that used to go through the middle of the ships, which made things very entertaining because as you go from one deck to the other, you've got to flip your gravity in the middle. I approve of the design decision that you'll notice they're now moved down to the bottom of the ship. So it has less Monty Python potential. Let's just put it that way. I speak from experience.
Can we before we move on from like the gravitational plane, can you talk about the weird like oscillation thing that can happen if you are outside of the ship and you cross the gravitational
Oh
plane?
yeah. I love that. So if you're on the ship and you say throw somebody off or you make them walk the plank, I don't remember whether it's in the new rules or not, but it was mentioned outright in the old rules and has always been there. You make somebody walk the plank, they jump off, they hit the gravity plane. There's nothing to stop them, so they bounce through, and the gravity reverses, and so they ping pong up and down in a decreasing oscillation as they slowly drift out, and it's usually the length of the ship is the width of the plane, and they drift all the way out until they hit the edge. When they hit the edge of the gravity plane, they hit the edge of the air envelope. And so once you're out there, the air rules in 5e are actually a little bit harsher than the ones in AD&D were, and you basically have X number of rounds where the personal air you've retained is good, and then drowning rules basically go into effect.
Oh wow! So
Yeah,
you're basically just watching. You get the extra entertainment if you throw someone overboard.
Oh yeah. Oh no. We had a cat folk monk who used to tie a rope to her waist and just go bouncing through it because she loved bouncing through the gravity plane.
I guess the Wizard Claw is doing something similar to that.
Yeah,
No.
I mean, we had a gift gladiator who for a while took up the habit of basically deploying the equivalent of water skis. So he hung out like halfway back in the air envelope and just ski behind the ship. Take pot shots at the occasional scabber.
That's funny.
All right, so that's sort of like the mechanics around the ship, how that works. Now, can you talk a little bit more about like space when you're out there in wild space, in the astral plane, and astral sea? Like, how does all this stuff work?
Okay. Well, like I said, the original idea was a Ptolemaic layout. So basically every star system's inside a crystal sphere, and what the stars are on the inside is going to vary. And some of them it's giant fires, and some it's giant gems, et cetera, et cetera. And then you have the phlogiston, something termed more in the 18th century as the ether, which lies between the spheres. And so you'd go out into that and travel and get around. Well, the phlogiston and the spheres have been replaced with the fact that now you get out to the edge of the system and you just sort of naturally transition into the astral. There are a lot of similarities. Being heavily involved with the Planescape and Spelljammer, I'm hearing a little bit of howling on both sides about blending the two, but I've been blending the two since the very beginning. If you look at the official Planescape products back in the day, the map of the multiverse they shows displays phlogiston and crystal spheres for the prime material plane. So that's all one piece, no matter how much people try and pry it apart. That's why I'm heavily involved with both. It's an interesting transition, and I can see why they did some things. In the astral, you've got the Githyanki. Everybody knows and loves, especially those who like centering mind flayers in a lot of our plots. In Spelljammer, they had a third part of the split. You had the split between the Githyanki and the Githzerai, and then you had the ones that went to the Prime and became known as the Pirates of Gith. Now, rather than reboot that, wanting to focus on the astral books that have come out, I can see that one reason to do that is to keep that Gith element in there, but add in and build on the stuff that people are already working on. So that's a sensible design decision that I can see. The flow was a weird place back in the day. Anything fire based was basically maxed out, doubled in radius, and centered on the caster or the source of the flame. So you'd see first timers go out and cast Fireball, and suddenly they're floating in the flow above the burning twigs that used to be their ship.
More problems with Fireball, honestly. It's
Oh
problematic.
yeah. Well, I mean that's why I loved adapting third edition and Pathfinder at my home table into Spelljammer. It's like, okay, well, here it makes sense. Everybody knows this. So most of the wizards that are out there pick up the energy admixture feat and are throwing cold balls and sonic balls and stuff like that instead of fireballs.
That's an interesting little nuance. Maybe we can cover this when we're talking about running Spelljammer, just like those technical things of like, how do you let your players know the sea they're sailing in is explosive without, ruining their game or
if they're on a ship and they have anybody from the crew or they've picked it up out in space anywhere, it is a known common knowledge thing. Every ship stops just inside the sphere so everybody can have that one last smoke because you're about to spend about 3 or 4 weeks without that or hot food. So let's go. I think the astral is a lot kinder setting to adventurers because of the lack of need for things like sustenance, sleep, etc., etc.
So let's dwell there for a second. If you're on the astral sea, the characters do not age, they don't feel hunger or thirst or anything like that. They just can sort of exist indefinitely. Is that the gist of it?
That's the gist of it.
Fair.
That actually is something that goes way back into the old days as well.
And what's the mechanical reason for that? Like, why does that happen?
Well, originally when all that was laid out, which was the AD&D Manual of the Planes, as I recall, the presentation of the astral was a realm of pure thought. So physical needs were not required, and in the original rule sets, you would substitute your intelligence. I think it was your intelligence for your strength, and your wisdom for your constitution while you were on the astral. So parties in the old days used to go there, and suddenly the coin is flipped between your fighters and your casters. But then again, these are also the days when instead of just the simple planar traits that we've got, there were extensive, okay, you go here, this is how it messes with your magic, and this is what's impeding. All that it was a lot more complicated, a lot more flavorful, but a lot more complicated rule setting.
What can you tell us about like space travel and traveling between realms? Because there's realm space, there's Kryn space, there's there's all these different types of spaces, and then worlds and realms within those. How are players and DMs sort of like navigating all of these uncharted worlds and exploring through space?
Well, they have a design decision I am not fond of. They have, in my opinion, overly simplified that because in the presentation and the new rules, that's all you need to do because you're in the astral and it is the realm of thought. You just think about it and you eventually get there.
You just get like a beacon in your mind or something.
Yeah, which removes a lot of the more exploratory elements and such, which I am very fond of. I'm into deep ancient, some pre-human civilizations and stuff like that.
Yeah.
There's like carcasses of dead floating gods out there. Like there's a really cool stuff to explore.
And that's another reason I think they did the astral, because with the astral you've got all the god corpses and such, which again stuff going back to second edition. And so it would make it a little more flavorful. The flow, other than its explosive elements, you really didn't encounter much there other than other ships. So I can see that. There were a few nasties here and there, but especially with a modern sensibility, it really does fit well. And Wizards has already made that sort of thing canon, because in the third edition days, when they still had all of their blog post supplements and other such, I think it was Mark Gendra did a series on an area of the astral that is canon in my campaigns, a place called Crosswinds Keep. And Crosswinds Keep was a bunch of retired adventurers from the realms who retired there because the elf and the human fighter fell in love, and she didn't want him to have the lifespan of a puppy from her perspective. So they retired. They retired, and they took 4 Spelljammer hammer ships with them to the astral and staked out a safe haven for people a little ways away from one of the Githyanki cities. So that's where Spelljammer and the astral really comes from. It has its roots in stuff they were doing on the web back in I don't know what was like third edition, right before 3.5, whenever that was.
Oh wow, that's really interesting.
You can still dig around Internet Archive. You can still find them.
I love the Internet Archive. It's
yeah. Look up Crosswinds Keep.
And actually, this podcast is powered by Internet Archive. Just like a quick shout out. That's where we host all of our episodes. This is free.
In the old Planescape, in the Astral book, one of the bigger categories of encounters that you'll run into are like prime and planar archmages who aren't done with their research yet, and just like look, it's only been 10,000 years. I'm hitting the snooze alarm. My snooze alarm is a 40 dice fireball. Fuck off. Get out.
Just go live in space and not be dead and skeletized.
You cannot let liches come out without me talking about one of the only named liches in the original Spelljammer, which is a concept I love because he's not evil. There is in the Skull and Shackles supplement, which is a collection of short adventures. There is a lich named Terigamar, who basically is a wizard who did not want to be bothered. So he put an Artifurnace, which basically is an engine for a Spelljammer, instead of having a helmet feed it magic items. He set up an Artifurnace so he wouldn't be bugged, and he took him and his homunculus and his familiar and his library and just took off into the deep middle of nowhere on the edge of the star system so as not to be bothered with. And when you find him, he is not evil. He is merely a lich because he kind of forgot to die. He was so focused.
He's so busy, he forgot to die.
And
if you play it right, he can even become a resource for the party. But it lends itself to really fun stuff like that.
I like when you see like what would traditionally be a horrible enemy be just like a fun resource to the party.
Yeah.
Playing against type.
That's the beauty of role play, getting to take things and flip them on their head and improv and riff. That's what makes D&D and other role play so much fun.
Oh yeah, in the old books, they all had like these in-character quotes at the bottom of every page, and you remind me of my two favorites. The first one was just Gungnir Trollblood on his first journey into wild space.
Yeah,
and then the next one was, I love the way realm space looks in the mornings. Nothing finer than a voyage between the stars. Gungnir Trollblood on his 43rd voyage into wild space.
Right? Yeah. I can't imagine it's going to be an easy transition for people who like players who don't have even a basic understanding of like anything outside their world.
I think it should be played up. It's like in the old days. Okay, we're sick of fighting stuff here. We're going to take the battle to hell.
Yeah,
sort of thing. It's like, wait, really? Wait, we've got to go to the moon.
Yeah.
And play hard into that. I mean, and if you really want to be a bastard about it, you had a group that's good about it. I ran a great campaign, and the way it started, I had everybody. It's like, okay, here are Forgotten Realms, Dragonlance, Greyhawk. I forgot like 3 other settings I had in there. Go ahead and generate your character from wherever the hell you want.
Mm-hmm.
And build it up to this level, and everybody wakes up naked in the galley of a Neogi slave ship in deep space, and we go from there.
Interesting.
Awesome.
Yeah.
So
it was great. The takeover of the ship and the mutiny, and taking that, and by the time they got to 19th level, they'd built up a fleet of 11 ships. Starting
that sounds
it
awesome.
was just the and they were like hunting slavers in 7 different star systems.
Yeah.
I was so proud of them.
I would be real into like an Amadeus inspired.
Yeah.
It's very cathartic and like just like a good time.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, it sounds like it was almost like it sounds like when Spelljammer came out, it was purposefully to turn things on its head. Like almost even in a cheeky sense, literally, they were like, let's split gravity in the middle of the ship to turn characters on their literal heads.
Well, I mean, it's funny because a lot of the stuff, like the crystal spheres and such, they were mining, old like 9th century BC to 1400 AD perceptions of the universe.
Yeah.
what if this is how it worked? It's a fantasy setting. Let's
Yeah.
go that way.
Yeah.
And that really gives you a lot of fun stretching.
Yeah. I just realized I have the wrong background today. I should have.
There you go.
There we go. I should have had a
nice
spaceship.
Yeah.
So when it came out, did it feel like it was turning the game on its head? Did it feel monumental? Was this a shift in the game?
Well, to me as a player and a DM, like I said, that in Planescape, it's like I don't even have to open this. I know it's getting integrated into my game.
Yeah.
And both have stayed there as the backbeat of all my games since. But sorry, lost my train of thought again. Question.
No, I was just wondering how it changed the game for you. Like, what did it seem monumental at the time?
The big thing about it, really, the two big things were this connects everything except Dark Sun, but this connects everything. Yeah, and that was huge, because at this point we had Greyhawk, we had Dragonlance.
Mm-hmm.
The Realms was the new stuff. Okay. And the ability to go, well, what if I want to take my ranger from the Barrier Peaks in Greyhawk and have him visit Waterdeep? Now you can, and you can have one hell of a voyage doing it.
Nice.
So it sounds like
now, and now since this is after the end of it, it's like I said earlier, Greyhawk, Dragonlance, and Forgotten Realms, there are big, fat, published products from second edition. Realm Space, Gray Space, and Kryn Space. You've got everything right there. All you got to do is add a couple of.
So is that where those different layers of space came from, them melding all these different things together, and then that you're allowed to travel between the different, what used to be completely different silos. Now I've got to walk from one to the other. That's awesome.
Yeah. So they needed a way to link these together, and fantasy space was the way to do it.
Yeah, and another thing, and another thing that's good shock value as a DM, if you've got people that are coming in totally cold and are used to regular D&D. Regular D&D, Mind Flayers are a big badass. Deleted.
Yeah.
In Spelljammer, they still are, but compared to the power levels of the players and the stuff that's going on, they're scaled down a little bit more along the maybe a rank or two above Klingons in power level, and they're all over the place. And we're going to see how that evolves in the new edition, because everybody's gone nuts over the Nautiloids. I'm convinced it's the Nautiloid ships in the video games and such that are behind a lot of the resurgence here.
Yeah. Well, can we jump into? I've seen reviews of the new Spelljammer expansion. There's also been some early criticism and some early praises. So I thought we could maybe, as we sort of transition out of this episode, can we address some of those criticisms that you've seen? And also, I'd love to hear what you think is great or praiseworthy about the expansion.
Okay. Let's take a few things from the top. Now, first of all, as far as the physical product goes, I know there's some people out there don't care for the art. That is simply a matter of taste. I love the art. I think it's pretty much fantastic, and it's great to have new official imagery for the first time for this setting in ages.
And do you mean like all the art in the book, or just like the alt cover art in the book? Okay.
The art in the book, the art on the cover, the special edition covers and such, all wonderful stuff there. The paper quality and thickness is higher than I've seen in any of their other products.
I thought I was double flipping pages because they're a little bit thicker.
Yeah. Now, that said, I would gleefully and immediately trade off that higher level paper and the higher level boxed presentation and such in a heartbeat for another 100 pages, because it does fall in total about 65 pages or so for each of the three books. One of those books is basically adventure outline.
I'd be curious then, like in those 100 pages, what would you want to be if you could wave a magic wand? Like, what would be contained in there that would be useful to you?
Well, rather than frame it in what would be useful to me, I'd rather frame it in what would be useful to new people coming.
Perfect.
Fair.
If there was another 100 pages there, I would like to see a few more ships. I would like to see some backgrounds. I would like to see some subclasses because there isn't one. You have a few new races. You got, I think it's 2 new magic items.
There are some background, like wild spacer type backgrounds.
Yeah,
but
I would like to see more.
Yeah.
They're a little bit more character-facing mechanics in that would be good. A bit of an expansion on the vehicles is obviously necessary. Now, I can see why they did a lot of what they did. People complain, oh, it moves so slow. I grew up in the port city of New Orleans. Trust me, you stand next to the river and watch a barge go by. That is about the speed that it is going.
Yeah.
Okay, they're keeping that normal. And one reason I think people mess this up is they're forgetting the huge mechanical difference. Because in the first edition games, I mean, in the AD&D games that Spelljammer was in, a combat round was 1 minute long.
What?
Whereas combat rounds are 6 seconds long.
Yeah.
Now, so if you wanted to truly adhere to that, not only would they be slow, their rate of fire and other such would be dropped drastically.
Yeah.
Because
it takes like an action to shoot, it takes an action to reload your cannon, and if it's a big cannon, sometimes it takes 3 actions to do some of this stuff. So if going longer would make it
exactly. And I don't blame people for not being aware of the little fiddly nuances like that. I mean, space combat is there should be a little bit more in the vehicle stuff there. I don't understand why they didn't really just work with or expand on what they used in Avernus or what they used in Saltmarsh for vehicle rules. Saltmarsh being very on theme. But by the same token, as a professional that's got a lot of published work under his belt, from the designer end, you get X amount of word count to do something. And if there's only 65 pages in each book, that it really is hard sometimes to get things pared down to the point where it really works well. And I think that a lot of the people looking at this are missing one of the elements that I love most, which is that there's so little here. It's like, yeah, that's constrained by word count, but look at what's in here. Really look at some of the deep cuts and the true love for the second edition setting that's in here. Details that are right when you don't necessarily expect adherence to a prior version to be right. Things like the line of ascendancy of the rulers of Bral being exactly on the money. Deep cut nods, like in the description of the Hadoji. They were never given a homeworld in second edition. They're given a homeworld in the new one. It's called Yazir, which is a deep cut because the Hadoji originally appeared as the Yazirian race in Star Frontiers, roughly 4 years earlier. There are things like this sewn throughout. As a matter of fact, if you go on Twitter and look up the artist, I'm sad to say I can't remember his name this morning, the artist who did the map of the Rock of Bral. He has a Twitter thread where he goes through and points out how he included visual nods in the map to all 120 odd locations that were numbered and listed in the original Rock of Bral supplement product. So that map is 100% on the money and compatible if you grab the Rock of Bral city book from second edition in PDF.
So you can use it pretty much like a one-for-one stand-in in English.
Exactly. All the buildings are placed exactly right, and he's got little visual thrills to, oh, this used to be the Mind Flayer Embassy, and you look at there's like a little thing in the corner. And it's beautiful, just the level of super deep detail in there. I mean, I understand people being disappointed in how short it is. I'm very disappointed in how short it is. I guess it's because I write this stuff that to see how much just pure love for all of the old stuff is tied up in the few words these guys had to work with. I love it. I absolutely love that.
Yeah, that's really Yeah, that's super interesting to have, and that's why I was so excited to hook up with you, Loki, because it's the
Hey, I
insider.
talked to my girlfriend about that, man.
Oh.
Seriously.
The
Love is a spectrum, and all
connect.
ranges are valid.
Oh, no offense taken.
the that insider knowledge and knowing things like, as a writer, you come into a project and someone else might say, we've only got 65 pages. And that is not a function of the writer's desire or knowledge or whether they know the deep cuts or not. And then it sounds like there were some real dedicated people who saw that and saw what hindrance it might be and thought, well, if we ground it in what exists, at least the fans can go, it's going to give you a much bigger launching point. You can go back and use these old supplements, which is nice to be able to revive that. And honestly, I feel like Wizards isn't always, necessarily the best at being like, this is compatible with stuff we've done in the past.
Yeah.
I'd like you to buy the new shit as much as possible, for sure. So it sounds like they took it on themselves to give us some opportunities to expand it ourselves, which is pretty cool.
I think that I think this is pure rampant speculation. And remember, I'm only a writer and a designer. I think that it needs to be taken into consideration. Wizards is in a very different position now than TSR was in back in the day because of two things. First of all, after years of me screaming about it, they finally put most of the second edition stuff up as PDFs for people to be able to buy.
Yay.
They finally quit ignoring that revenue stream and that fan base. So they've got those things that people are going to be looking at, I'm quite sure. And I've already seen at least 8 or 10 products hit D&D Beyond that people are doing. I'm considering working on some myself as soon as my financial situation gets a little bit more stable. I've got some ideas I'm talking to one of my publishers about.
Nice.
But that to a lot of the the gaming public and such, that's nice, but it's not a substitute for full-on support.
Right.
Yeah. We'll see. I mean, and we'll and I won't go off onto the discussion about it because I haven't versed myself in it enough to say, but everything's going to end up changing with the D&D 1 stuff or whatever happens. That so it's really kind of a holding pattern thing. That's why I'm a little bit apprehensive about Planescape reboot. If they do it with this kind of love, I'm down. Even if it's short, I'll buy it. But if it's hitting right before an edition change, that doesn't bode well for support.
Yeah.
We haven't been able to wrap our head around that whole deal at all. That's going to be a big topic.
Yeah.
Well, we can pick up all that in the next episode, I'm guessing.
Yes.
I do want to explore that some more. Before we wrap for this discussion, we've talked about some of the maybe like the criticisms, some things that could have been done maybe a little bit better. We know some limitations come from just like how much copy is available to fill these pages. Where's the praise coming from for Spelljammer? What do you think they've done really right with this re-release?
I love the artwork. I cannot express how overjoyed I am that they got Dyson Logos to redo all of the maps and such. I actually have a custom Spelljammer ship that he did just for my campaign that he shared. Yeah, he called it the Big Jammer. It's called the Void Song in our game. But yeah, nice. It's an evolved, larger version of the Small Jammer ship. So he is such an utter badass with the cartography and has such a perfect feel for the old school that I cannot think of anyone that would have been a better choice for that. The illustrations, particularly the stuff that Claudio Pozas has done, tons of fun. I predict a lot of silliness ensuing now that the plasmoids are no longer a monster race and are now a PC race.
They seem like a very interesting race to play too. Of all the races,
rooted in the Dralocytes from Star Frontiers, they're a blast. I think that I really do like the format if it had more pages.
Yeah.
Because then you've got here's my idea here. You're the player. You can look through whatever you want over here. You can keep your monster book going right over here. While you're flipping through other things. I like that. I love the I love the layout of the DM screen. Uh, I will always be puzzled as to why they didn't include a maneuverability in the ships, but we'll get into that in the next episode. Um, I like the fact that they managed to present the setting so well within such a limited page count. And if the setting is going to have a complete reboot, I really think that going with the Astral was a great logical choice. And I also think it was a great choice because you'll have a lot of people that are into planar adventures and stuff that have already been playing with Natasha's book and so on that may get attracted into Spelljammer as a result of that.
Yeah, I know we've been really excited about this setting, and with the campaign we're playing, it's very much focused on these different planes and how they're interconnected. So I think, Spelljammer is very timely for us because I think it introduces a nice new mechanism for us to eventually explore these.
Oh, well, keep in mind the great way to kind of force your players into it if you're doing a plane walking campaign. Hey, we need to get somewhere. Well, that's great. There aren't any portals. Oh, well, we'll just plane shift. Doesn't work getting there. It's a sealed sphere.
Yeah.
What does that mean? It means you got to
travel.
sail, buddy. You got to sail.
I'm sailing away. All right. Do we have any last parting questions for Loki for this conversation, or how are we feeling?
Feeling good. I think he answered all the stuff that's on this list.
Yeah,
Awesome.
the overarching stuff I feel like makes a lot more sense to me now.
Yes.
Nice. Well, cool. Loki, thank you again so much for coming on and sharing your just massive amounts of wisdom and lore with us and history. That was really a treat.
More than wisdom, trust me.
Well,
All interesting people are.
Exactly. And I think we're also very blessed because you'll be joining us for more than just this episode. We have another conversation on sort of how to run and the more technical aspects of running Spelljammer campaigns and other great content. So stay tuned for that.
That's it for this week's episode. Don't forget to subscribe to the podcast if you haven't already, and head over to +1togaming.com for more live discussions, actual plays, character creation tips, and more. Thanks so much for listening, and we'll catch you next time.